We're talking today about menopause and that great stage, that certain stage, women of a certain stage. And we're here with the founder of Women of a Certain Stage, CEO founder Lauren Chiren, tuning in from the UK today. And we're really, really glad to have you here. Welcome to For the Love of Health web show. We are really excited to have you, Laura, because talking about prevention, talking about preventative health, seems such an area that most people, it's like an ideal, but then it doesn't actually come to fruition. Most of the medicine in the United States has to do with dealing with things as they happen, as we actually get really, really, really sick or have an emergency. What is menopause look like for most women? Is it that type of like acuteness, things are happening suddenly and very strongly, or is it for most women like a slower burn?
I don't think there is a most women scenario, and I think that is really important to recognize everyone's journey through menopause is really unique. If you have had a surgical or medical menopause, then you're going to go into a very cliff edge menopause where it's pretty much overnight or within a few weeks. If you go through a natural kind of perimenopause phase over a number of years into menopause, it's going to be a slower burn, but neither is more or less acute for the individual, and each individual's experience is very, very unique to them. And I think that's one of the things that's most poorly understood is that everyone wants to go, this is what menopause is, this is how it's going to happen, and this is how you're going to experience it. And the reality is that no two people are going to experience menopause in the same way.
Right. And I think that with, different stages of a woman's life too, it's always been kind of shrouded in a misunderstanding or a sense of trying to define it. And with all generalizations, yes, most people fit in boxes a certain way. Like most women have a cycle of a certain number of days, but not all women will fit into that box. So it sounds like it's something that can be very individualized. So depending on what age. Now, menopause, we don't really hear about that in the news too much. I think the most recent thing I was seeing was, I think, is it Naomi, the actress Naomi Watts? Isn't she doing her own company now? And some celebrities have become more on point with having their own menopause companies. And why do you think that is?
I believe that if you are looking for a topic, you're going to see a lot of it around you. And so if you've currently just had your first baby, when you walk down the street with your baby in a pram, everyone seems to have a baby in a pram. If you look on the news and you look on social media for menopause, everybody's talking about menopause and has an opinion about it. So for that reason, for the last 10, 12 years, I think a number of celebrities have chosen to speak out about their personal experience. And for whatever their personal agenda is, I can't speak to that. You need to speak to them. But a number of them have decided to set up a company with a product or with a service or collaboration with somebody. And it's very popular at the moment for people to go and do that.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I am not yet in menopause. So, I mean, and the way that news gets fed to you now, you have to actively seek out topics outside of who you are because you'll be just given things that are for your age or for what you're going through. So,
Exactly.
right now, buying a house or having a stable career, what to do in your first few years of marriage versus someone who down the line might be getting things in their algorithms all the time about menopause because that's what they're actively in. So that's a very interesting
Mm.
thing. But do you think menopause education should be somewhere else outside of that internalized algorithm? Should that be accessible in other points of view, like education or everyday news?
So in the UK, for example, when I started working in this space back in 2013, 2014, menopause was not really being talked about, but we have lobbied for that to change. So now we have menopause in the school education curriculum. We have doctors being mandatorily trained on menopause, and we also have a new mandatory requirement for employers with over 250 people to do a menopause action plan to commit to what they're going to do going forward. In the States, over 20 states have already applied for regulations to give workers rights for protection through menopause as well, Rhode Island being the first one that has had that. So I think again, it's very much if you're in that phase of life, you see that. But if you're in the baby stage, then you maybe see that. Or maybe you're like me and you're in the baby stage and menopause at the same time. Like
Yeah.
it can be a road crash. It can be like a big collision at the same time. So menopause can happen at any age. And I think that's one of the other really critical pieces of information I want people to understand. I became menopausal at 37, and I know many people that become menopausal in their teens or 20s. And we need to really have an understanding of what menopause is so that we understand what the potential downstream impacts of that are to our health.
Yeah, and you're referring to like the UK government's menopause in the workplace. So was that something that was designed before you, or were you part of that lobbying effort to create that
That's what we've
infrastructure?
been So we've been lobbying for they're called menopause action plans, and the menopause in the workplace was a report that the government did, and then that's led to a number of other initiatives that came up with a bunch of different initiatives, some of which the government took on board, some of which they didn't, and now we have menopause action plans for employers over 250, and that's currently voluntary. Next year it'll be mandatory, and it's very aligned with what's happening in the States as well.
It's incredible. I mean, congratulations, just to have been part of such a movement to create that again that infrastructure so that someone doesn't have to feel like they're self-piloting through them to get all the solutions. The fact that they can actually work at a workplace that has a designated infrastructure to support an individual who is in menopause, that's great. And so I guess, do you want to give a loose definition as to what menopause is exactly, just in regards to health and how it affects a woman?
So menopause is 12 months after you've gone through your last period. It's a retrospective diagnosis. So the reality is when you've had your last period or your last bleed, you don't know it's your last bleed. So we wait for 12 months and then we say, I haven't had a bleed for 12 months, therefore I'm now menopausal and therefore I'm postmenopausal for the rest of my life. But prior to menopause, you've probably been perimenopausal, which means from your regular period up to the point of it becoming less regular potentially and then stopping. That's a period of somewhere between 2 and 10 years for most people, but it can be longer, it can be shorter. And that's where symptoms can start to creep in. So you might find your periods become heavier or lighter, they might become closer or further apart, bleeds might become more erratic. There's a number of different things that can come in, like low mood, anxiety, and there are a number of different symptoms of menopause. So as we go through that perimenopausal phase, often people might find that their headaches become worse, they might become more migrainey, they might get tinnitus, dry eyes, itchy, dry skin, nails, hair. And there's multiple different things that can go on. Me personally, when I was in my role as senior exec in financial services at the time, I've been headhunted twice to two senior roles. I had global teams, America, India, and the UK, and I thrived in the complexity of the work that I did. And then I found myself sitting in meetings unable to speak up because my throat was so tight with anxiety that I would have to sip hot water to relax my throat muscles enough to be able to speak out. Or in another meeting where my heart was beating out of my chest, I literally held onto the arms of the chair watching the clock tick down, waiting for the meeting to be finished because I was worried about falling on the floor. So menopause affects people in many different ways. I didn't have any indication that my periods had stopped because of menopause. I didn't have any indication that I had hot flushes. I didn't have any indication of mood swings, any of the things that people normally associate with menopause. And for me, I had my son at 37 and never had another period. But I didn't think menopause because I fed my son for a year where I didn't have a period, and then I was on contraception that meant I didn't have a period. So I didn't realize during all that time that actually I had just become menopausal at 37, straight after having him.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
that's really important to be aware of. So if someone has menopause under the age of 51, 52, then we have to be thinking about what's going on for their health because we need that estrogen in our body for our bone health, heart health, brain health, for all our body systems, for all our body functions. So we have to think about how we're looking after ourselves, what we're going to do about that, what's our action plan around that.
Right, that makes sense. I'm a clinical herbalist, and I love the idea of using phytoestrogenic plants to support the body to kind of help that equilibrium as your estrogen diminishes because of its strong bind to the receptor sites in our body, but not as strong as our endogenous estrogen. So I love that picture that is being painted here of supporting the body with routines and paying attention to the body during that time period because like you said it could be something that is brought on by an event, a birth or some other stressful event, or it could be a long time of symptoms that have different pictures being painted here. I mean, it's quite interesting, how it really can have to become part of a lifestyle change to be able to support that transition. Um, so, you're in it, you're studying menopause. What kinds of studies have come out recently or factors about menopause that made you be like, huh, that was interesting. I think I'm going to save that note for later. I'm going to look at that study later that maybe most people haven't seen.
So I've been studying menopause for 20 years now, and I became menopausal at 37. I am now 57, and I've been studying menopause. So every day I'm adding clinical studies to the research and to my library, and we have many, many, research papers, science papers, studies, PhD papers, books. Like we have a massive library there, which is divided into menopause and ADHD, menopause and epilepsy, menopause and gut health, menopause and diabetes, menopause. Like we have the whole A to Z all the way through to menopause and work, menopause and sexual health and pleasure. So there isn't like any one topic that suddenly surprises me. We have a good way of managing all the research that's been coming out over the last couple of decades. And we create the big library for our students to be able to access that. What I can tell you is that women's health, as you know, is poorly understood, it's poorly researched because of our hormonal cycles, and that's just beginning to shift and change over the last sort of 20, 30 years. So we're starting to see more longitudinal studies coming through now, which are giving us more insightful information. And what I think is really interesting personally to me is the fact that I haven't gone down the HRT route. I haven't gone down the herbalist route. I've just gone through, I've tried various things. They didn't work for me. And I don't know what my later life health will be like, but I've had to make just lifestyle choices to be able to manage my own journey through menopause. And I think that the studies that are coming through that are demonstrating that our DNA, our genetic structure, has an influence and an impact on the choices we make and the decisions we make. So what I genuinely believe is that there is no one right route through this. There is no one kind of here is the golden path through. And I speak to people every day, as you can imagine, when you work in the field, you get people going, "Oh, I've got the supplement, or I've got that band, or I've got this bar of chocolate, and or I've got this thing that's going to miraculously make all your menopause symptoms disappear." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, right, that's great." But the reality is each individual person, and I know you work, very much on an individual basis, is
Right.
trying to understand who that individual is, where they're at, what they need at that moment in time, because it changes and it morphs, and we don't know, what the future is going to look like. We can only cope and deal with what we can pick up from the body today and give the best ideas from today. And what I'm really fascinated about is the DNA and genetic research that's coming out, which shows us which are we better predisposed to taking supplements or hormone replacement or herbs or changing our diet or something else, something else, something else, or a combination of all of the above. And that's the bit that I think we're really missing. And that is what I find absolutely fascinating to see, what's going to come up. Why does one person on HRT live a happy, healthy life? One person on not on HRT live a happy, healthy life. Same weight, same height, same activity levels, same stress levels, help, and that's what I really want to know more about.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and I appreciate it. And I love the idea of unpacking the new and helping people pay attention to, the DNA and the lineage understanding to how it can affect your menopause and your health in general through lifestyle and through just who you are as a person. And then unpacking too the fact that you have built and created infrastructure, which is going to be very practical for practitioners who are listening in because there's a lot of information and we're getting information constantly. So how do we kind of create a resource for our clients and for ourselves to be able to reference that information effectively for the topic that we're so focused on or the modality that we're focusing on? So I really love that you mentioned that. I think again, menopause, I haven't been actively seeking out information. The last thing that kind of flashed really strongly was the Naomi was that celebrity endorsed products. And I think also for women in general, the thing that kind of cut through and pushed through here in the States recently was we changed I think it was PCOS, we changed a particular disorder to acknowledge that it's a metabolic syndrome and not
Mhm.
just an issue with the particular tissues and terrain of the women's reproductive system, that it's a full body systemic syndrome. So it's like we're certainly straddling new definitions every now and then
Mhm.
here in the States as to what a woman experiences, and that it's actually a health issue and not just something that is of the terrain of women. Do you want to talk about that? Because that can be, there's a lot to unpack there, right? A lot of mystery that is being unraveled. And finally, women are saying, yes, I've been feeling this way. And this is how I've always felt. And I'm really glad to now have this proper label.
So it's interesting because people are beginning to now realize that menopause can happen at any age, and that is a big shift in the conversation that we're having. So it's no longer an older woman's thing. I'm 20 years postmenopausal, as I said, and I don't see myself as a little old lady in a rocking chair knitting with grey hair, right? I was in a boxing lesson this morning, and I've got golf lesson tomorrow. I've never played golf before, but now I'm taking up golf just because I had an opportunity, and I'm doing self-defense classes. I have a background in martial arts, but I haven't done it for years. And now all of a sudden I'm back out there doing it again. So I think that we need to reimagine who we are and what we can do. The challenge we've got as women is the fact that our medical health practitioners are not necessarily trained in our menstrual health issues. So you mentioned PCOS or PMOS, and the fact that we're beginning to start to have different terminology. Even within menopause, we're changing some of the terminology of the different things that we can potentially be impacted by. One of the things for the people that are listening is that genital urinary issues can be massive. So painful sex, urinary incontinence, painful sitting down in your clothes just because your vulva is now sensitive. But with estrogen, localized estrogen and vaginal estrogen, we can very quickly and very easily remediate most of those things. And yet we're not talking about it. Now we're seeing research coming out talking about using vaginal estrogen to remove the risk of sepsis and death, right? So just by talking about something super simple that anybody in the UK, we can buy vaginal estrogen over the counter if you're menopausal and over 51. And most of the places in the world, you have to go on have to go on a prescription. To get a prescription, you have to have an appointment. To have an appointment, you have to have an examination. But you can just phone up here and order it online, or you can order it from
Yeah.
your doctor, buy it in the chemist. So I think that we've got a long way to go. There's a long trajectory to really be able to change the narrative of menopause. But having, the opportunity to come and talk to you today, I'd like to bite your hand off because I'm like, yes, we get to share this conversation. And even
Right.
if there's nothing specific for anyone here, they might just go away and think, oh, well, menopause is inevitable, but suffering's optional.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, and that's beautiful. And absolutely, I think that, like what you said with the restrictions and people being able to get what they need, if we can make those pathways easier, then yeah, people are gonna get what they need a lot faster. Have you heard of Discaria villosa, the wild yam? I think that's a cream that a lot of it's a herbal, it's an herb that can be used particular for that particular reason. But I also that you were talking about as far as like the dryness and the tissues of the body. A lot of women over here talk about that in natural circles. And then there's something else that you said. Oh, I didn't know that the estrogen had such health implications outside of women. Like that's really cool. That makes you think how powerful our innate chemistry is. And then, of course, the phytoestrogens too, because it's interesting how they co-evolved as plants to match our receptor sites pretty darn well. So it's
But
just
that,
pretty
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, but I think that's what's so important is that traditionally estrogen was made from pregnant mare's urine, whereas the estrogens that we get now for HRT are made from yam.
Yeah,
So
wild.
they're body identical. So I think that's the thing that people don't understand. We're not talking about big pharma
Right.
medications. We're talking about
Yeah.
very body identical um, produced
Yes.
items that are so much more in alignment with our body than we've ever seen before. And we didn't have
Beautiful.
that 20 years ago. So the whole industry is moving on. It's a long way to go, but it's
Yeah.
definitely moving on.
Yeah, we don't walk away today knowing the job is done, right? But
No,
but
never, never. I'm always a learning.
yeah, no, that's incredible. Your passion is truly contagious. I mean, it's so awesome and remarkable to look at your website, to look at how you have created a really dynamic, broad product suite, right? With the whole terminology, but a ladder of ways for people to engage. You have free courses, so people can get information about menopause, the elementary ABC, what is menopause for them, menopause literacy, if you will. And then you have like, ways for people to become mentors in menopause, become coaches in menopause. And I think adding on coaching to a holistic in-person brick and mortar practice, I'm a huge advocate for it because you're creating language for the person and an opportunity for the person to heal in between sessions. So menopause, mentorship, why and how, what are a couple success stories that you've seen because someone has become a menopause coach?
Oh my gosh. Well, I've trained over 1,900 people in over 36 countries now, and the stories are phenomenal. We just had someone sign up yesterday from Peru who's going to join the next cohort to become a menopause coach. Last week, we run the menopause trainer program, and a lot of the people in there were also qualified menopause coaches through Women of a Certain Stage. And what they said was just phenomenal and really blew me away. And one of the stories that always stuck with me was I've been working with a large corporate organization as a menopause trainer for a number of years. And I kept on talking to them about bringing menopause coaches in. They're like, yeah, 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 whatever, we'll get around it. We'll do it. We'll do it. But they just liked the training. And then I got a phone call 6 months after I delivered my last training session to them. I was like, sure, hey, how can I help? And like, well, one of our senior leaders on the board has put their notice in and she's really struggling with menopause. And I was like, well, this is why I've been doing the training. What have you done to support her? What's the package you put in place for her? I'm like, well, we don't really know how to do that bit. We know how to work with you to raise awareness, but we don't know how to do the actual support. And I'm like, okay, well, this is what we've been trying to talk to you about. And
Mm-hmm.
so we had a really great conversation. I said, well, why don't we give her 3 months worth of menopause coaching? And she was a very senior individual. It was going to cost them six figures for her to leave, and it was probably going to cost them near six figures to replace her as well. So it was a big
Right.
expense. So to bring
Yeah.
a coach in to work with her was tiny in comparison.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked with her for just about 3 months, and towards the middle of the program, she turned around to her company and said, would they be willing to consider her withdrawing her resignation because she felt able to go back to work?
Yes, that's and that's brilliant. What a brilliant testimonial. I mean, and that honestly, we can walk away with that. That is perfect because I love how grounded you are in the customer reality, right? It's
Yeah.
her reality is she's a very high stress environment, high executive woman who this would be really altering to the company.
Mhm.
And so it's wonderful. It speaks to the company who says, yeah, let's do this because we want to keep this employee. And it speaks to the health of the person who is in that threshold of like, do I
Yeah.
go or do I stay? It has something has to give. And it's amazing that coaching supported her journey. And I'm of course I'm sure there's plenty of strategies you have in place that are so
Mhm.
specific to what she's going through. So anybody can create that kind of space and solution using what they know and using the passion and the health information that they have. So that's
Yeah.
a great lesson for our audience today. Um, Man, it's like menopause. I don't really, I don't want to go into it. You hear so many horror stories of, and I mean, so many people who are suffering from things who they just assume it. They assume that they're going into it. It has become kind of a blanket statement for like, oh, I think I'm going into perimenopause. I think that's what's happening. So, what would you say to that person?
What would I say to someone who thought they were going to perimenopause?
Yeah, like if they're
Yeah,
starting
welcome
being
to my club.
like,
Let's get ready to rock and roll. Let's get ready to
yeah.
step into the most positive time of your life. Let's get ready to recognize how amazing a human being you are. Recognize all your amazing achievements in life. Look back on the relationships that you've succeeded in, the achievements you've had in, studying and work. Look at maybe you've had a family and brought some children up. Look back and just celebrate who you are. Recognize the incredible wisdom, knowledge, and power that you bring to this time of life. And okay, now let's look at you. Now let's look at how you're going to, balance out your feelings of this time of life. Let's think about your mindset, your hydration, your nutrition. Let's look at your movement, your boundaries, your responsibilities. Let's look at how you're going to ask for help and support, where you're going to get that from. And, each person will put together their own personal menopause plan. That's what we, as coaches, we support people to do, right? So we take them through a structured process to help them think about this is who I am, this is how I feel, usually down there, and I want to be up here. So my job is to train people, or myself to train people to help those individuals become back to the place they want to be, or the new place that they want to be. And it's a time of life where we're questioning our relationships. We're questioning how we interact with people. What is it that we want to contribute to our society, to our community, to our workplace, to our home at this time of life? And it's a time, if anyone said to me 20 years ago I would stand on stages like Sydney Opera House or, Emperor's Palace in Johannesburg or Disney or Hollywood in LA, like and stand on stage in front of people and talk, I'd be going, you're joking. You couldn't pay me enough money to do that. But now it's kind of like, I don't really care what anyone thinks about how I look or how I sound or what I'm saying. If I can make one person who's listening to this today and every other talk that I do suddenly go, oh, it's just menopause. I can do something about it.
Well, I
Then it's
love it.
fine.
I love how you reframed it because it wasn't what I was expecting, and that's great. I mean, because you reframed it as let's celebrate who you are, and that you are in this box. If you feel that you are this way, you acknowledge that they're feeling that way, and then starting from a place of celebration instead of a place of this is what's wrong with your body, and this is the step-by-step framework to how to get better. Right? It's a switch from one of someone has to listen to you because you are handing over your autonomy to one where they're celebrating their uniqueness. So I think that I really appreciate you breaking that down and then ease how you transition so well into then explaining how they can then go deeper in who they are and their awareness of what they're feeling
Oh
and then
yeah.
where they want the best place to go. So thank you so much. So yeah, you've been on some incredible stages. I mean, everybody's got to check out womenofacertainstage.com. I'm telling you, there's so many great resources and avenues. Your Instagram is also excellent. Your Instagram has a lot of great videos and interviews and things that are recent, talking about menopause and how it affects women and men and everybody all over the world. And we got some great health information today. So, Lauren, thank you for coming and sharing with us today some a little morsel of your knowledge.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Everybody take care. Stay cool in the summer heat and tune in to another episode. Check out Lauren Chiren, Facebook, LinkedIn. And yeah, is there any other resources that you want to check out, Lauren, on your website or anything specific?
I think the best place to contact me is LinkedIn.
Yeah.
So that's where I spend my time. That's where you'll find me. I'll reply most quickly. And yeah, so definitely there.
Yeah, sounds great. Connect with her professionally and check out her work and her programs. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Lauren. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.